Welcome to the Sustainable Clinical Medicine podcast. I am your host, Sarah Smith. I am a practicing rural family physician and the charting coach. This is the podcast for physicians and advanced practice providers who are ready to step back from the busyness of their clinical day to share ideas, question everything, and redesign their clinical day. We are redesigning clinical medicine to create sustainable clinical days and create time for our lives outside of medicine. Join us for discussions with world experts who are helping design sustainable models of clinical medicine and the physicians or clinicians who have discovered or designed sustainable models of clinical medicine for themselves. Hello and welcome back, everybody. So today we have Dr. Amy Vertrees with us, and Amy has just put out a brand new book. And what I was fascinated with is this is a book that helps us, but also our more junior colleagues, perhaps with what holes not to fall in as we graduate. So welcome, Amy. I will let you introduce yourself.
Oh, thank you so much, Dr. Smith. I followed your journey. I'm so proud of all the things you're doing, like filling such an important void. And that's what I'm doing as well. I was in the military for 17 years and served my obligation, did 3 deployments to Afghanistan and Iraq, and, came back. And when I left the military, I decided to go into civilian practice, started off employed and found some challenges there. And then, opened my own private practice, found some challenges there. And I discovered, a long time ago that there's definitely lessons that we were not taught in residency. There's definitely things that, I wish I had known. And I think these are things that we maybe just have to kind of encounter. But when we encounter them, the nice thing about books and social media and podcasts is that we can compile these lessons and share them with people and, really exponentially improve the world. And so that's how the book started. That's how my mission, a Boss Business of Surgery series started. It actually started in 2015 when I was chair of our Young Surgeons Committee. And I was trying to get people to come to meetings because our chapter was really active, but we just couldn't get people to come to meetings. And I was like, you have to offer them something. And, what I basically said, if I need to know this, other people may do too. And that's how it all started.
Perfect. Okay. So let's take you back and say, what were some of the challenges that you were coming across in your exploration of this new world outside of residency or in residency? Yeah.
Oh, such a great question. And I think what happens is that we become, competent. Like for me, it became a competent surgeon. I checked the boxes. I gained the knowledge. I did well on the test. I got all the cases, got the skills. But, when I went to do the job, there's almost like this, are you kidding me? How did I not know this? And so I think that there's things that we were just not taught about, like the business of medicine. And the business of medicine is interestingly not the money. It's obviously is the money. How do you offer value in exchange for money? So we just don't actually even think of that simple of a concept. But also interacting with other people. I think that's where the biggest challenge is. And I can tell you that's where I have the need of people seems to be the greatest, and things of interacting with other people, like difficult partners and colleagues, but also our interactions with ourselves. How do we manage complications? How do we keep ourselves from feeling shame? How do we battle perfectionist thinking? There's so many aspects of this that we don't even know is going to be a challenge until we experience it. And what happens with a lot of these things, especially when we don't advocate well for ourselves, or we don't have a good interaction, we feel a lot of shame about ourselves. And, when we feel shame, we don't reach out to other people. So what happens is we think we're the only one suffering. And I think that's the main thing, the main challenge that I have is putting that message out there so people don't have to feel that shame. So I think the shame resilience was something that I was not expecting, and is the one battle I think that we have, that if we win this, that is the simplest way we can get people to really improve their own impact on the world.
Mm-hmm. I saw a very interesting and profound statement this week, of course, on social media. And it was just a comment. It said, shame grows in the dark.
Yes.
So when you are all alone thinking you're the only one experiencing this and that you're somehow bad or done something wrong, and so you don't want to share it, it gets bigger and starts to be all consuming. And that's what we mean by grows in the dark. If you leave it to your own devices and your own brain, shame is a very, very powerful and terrible place to be.
Exactly. I've heard that as well. But another statement that I heard too is that when we have these negative emotions, when we resist them, it's like actually causing them to exponentially grow. So a lot of times, either ignoring it or resisting it is actually how it grows.
Now, when we say resisting, what do we mean by resisting? So when we say we resist, say shame, what are you expecting that to mean?
Yeah. So if we're in shame and thinking like, it's just me, no one else feels this way, or, I'm not going to feel shame. I'm just going to ignore it. I'm going to just put on a happy face. A lot of people think that's what coaching is too. Like we just tell people to feel happy. That's not exactly how it is. I think our ability to process shame and, instead of resisting and saying, I'm not feeling this, or I'll just put something else, it's not genuine to ourselves. And so, we basically start lying to ourselves. And that's where the resistance can cause that to magnify, because now we add shame with I shouldn't feel shame. So now I feel bad about feeling shame. And then I feel bad about feeling bad about feeling bad.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So we're kind of creating this like bubble burst effect eventually by kind of pushing it down further.
Yes. And it hurts our relationship with ourselves when we lie to ourselves about how we're feeling. Like if I tell myself I shouldn't be feeling this way, then, now I'm like, well, now there's something wrong with me. So I still feel bad. And now I feel like there's something wrong with me for feeling bad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. All right. So tell us some of the navigating that you did early on. So you came out, how you're competent in your surgical skills. Lovely. Is this now you have practice? Is this what you mean by this is where you first encounter those relationships? Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's a great point. That my first was a feeling of, powerlessness in the military. Of course, we cannot always control the volume that we have, the location that we're in, and, the people that we work with. So there was a lot of resistance there too, of feeling, lack of choice and things like that, and learning different personalities and things like that. So there was definitely a lot of that. So first was just dealing with the powerlessness and lack of choice. And so the Army was helpful in that way. They're very, very clear, and the Army is about the mission and not. And so that part was most helpful when, especially medicine too, because, really medicine is a business, and therefore the mission matters. So, when we think that our needs must be met over the mission, then it becomes a bit of a problem, because the mission has to go on. The mission is bigger than just us individually. So, we have to protect ourselves with our own autonomy and our feelings, but we also have to understand we're part of a bigger mission that has to go too. So I hope this makes sense, but we have to keep our own individuality, but also our understanding our contribution to this. And so we don't have to be at the mercy of this. I think one of the biggest mistakes we're making now is to feel like the proportion of this is off, meaning that we have to hold up a broken system. We have to give up everything and do everything. We have to stay all the hours and do all the things because the patients have to be seen. Otherwise, they'll have to wait. So that imbalance, I think, was the first thing that I started realizing, is that, how do I maintain control of myself and true and authentic to myself and still, serve the mission? We have to understand the boundaries on both of those things. We have to accept that when we went into medicine, there's some things that we have to sacrifice, but we don't have to sacrifice everything. So I think the first part was the balance of understanding what that looks like and realizing that there's so much choice in this. And that's how we change the system, is recognizing our own individual power compared to the big system. Because I think, I'm interested to see how people really resonate with the book, because, the book is about empowering, individual empowerment. And, we really do have, on its whole, a challenging system. And I'm not saying the system doesn't have to change. I think that it does. But I think that when we strengthen ourselves individually, then the environment changes around us. And so I think that's the first lesson that I learned, is, and this is true for the big system, but it's also true for individual relationships. When I changed my perspective, I changed how I showed up in the world. And that actually is what caused the most change, which is actually influence and not power over other people. And that's what I think the basics of the lessons that I've learned through all that.
Got it. So when you're back in the military and you're on assignment, so you're part of a mission and you don't have autonomy about who you're working with, even your location, but do they also have protection for the individuals, like hours you can work when you start and stop shift? Like, is that more protected within the military experience that you had, do you think?
There's actually, it's interesting. It depends on the environment because, on deployment, we are basically on call 24/7 for, 4 to 6 months, sometimes longer for people with longer deployments. So in that particular instance, that was by definition not a controllable experience. And so taking yourself to the very individual moments, the only way to manage that. In the day-to-day job, we did not have as much control over the location and the job that we had. For example, I was at Walter Reed, and we, of course, the war injured came back and took precedence. So a lot of our elective stuff didn't. They pushed it out into the system, but the system would not allow us to, sort of recapture those people because the system itself couldn't manage it. So on the big picture, I couldn't control my day-to-day stuff as much as I really wanted to, but I did actually have some control that let me change the environment a bit, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just curious to know whether, because we've got the system, public system, and they've got the kind of the military system, and we don't always have that like insight into the differences in the two. Then, as you were passing into the employed position, tell us what's different. What did you notice as you moved into that world?
Well, the funny thing is that like when you're like one little small piece of a big mission, and everyone is paid the same and all the things, it's all based on your rank and things like that, you sort of feel like the same as everybody else. So there's like this natural camaraderie and things like that. When I got onto the deployed section, it almost felt, it was jarring because, you had to think like, you had to make a case for how much to get paid. And, there was like this feeling of like, I'm getting ripped off, or, am I really like advocating for myself enough? And they're making more and I'm making less. And I was like, this is so strange. And I never actually even remembered how much I was making a year because it didn't matter. But now, there was this sense of competition that I had not experienced before. And, not just the competition for money, but for like perceived status and number of patients and things like that. So it was an interesting, comparison is the thief of joy kind of phenomenon that I started experiencing. And, that caused a lot of stress. And so that was the first thing I noticed. The second is that I just had a lot more choices. And that was another, lessons in the book too, about like, what do we do with those choices? So, we go there and we think that everything's just going to happen for us, and start to realize that I'm much more in control of my environment and my job than I was in the military, which was both great and terrifying. It's like, how am I supposed to do any of this? So, the ability to market for myself and, create a clinic schedule that worked for me, because they're like, okay, well, what would you like to do? I was like, what do you mean? You mean I just pick? Like, how am I supposed to do that? So the amount of choices, so the comparison of the amount of choices, I think were probably the two biggest challenges that I saw. And so it took a little while to kind of catch on to it. And I definitely like the ability to make some choices. And, but then, that opens up a whole different number of skill sets, which is, what do I do if I get it wrong? What if I overbook myself or underbook myself, but now my cases aren't high? What if I choose wrong? And then they're like, then you worry, it's like, is everyone going to think I'm stupid because I don't know how to come up with how many patients I should have? And, they ask me, what's my pref card for this case? I'm like, I don't know. What is he doing? So it's really having to support yourself through not knowing how to do stuff, and support yourself through doing things wrong,
Mhm.
and support yourself when people don't understand you, or then you find out you don't understand them either.
Mhm.
And we don't know how to interact with other people to get what we want. We underestimate our influence over other people. So those were some of the new lessons that I learned employed.
And where did you go for some of those answers? Like, did you go and chat to colleagues? Were you going online? Were you reading things? Like, how did you handle those just early interactions, early negotiations?
A lot of times I looked to other people too. So I looked and saw what other people were doing. So when they asked me for things like, well, what instruments you like, I would get old, prep cards. I brought mine from my old job. And then I just asked. Social media is great with a lot of these groups saying, like, what are you guys doing? And so once I kind of like released the idea that I had to know everything,
Mhm.
that put me in a position where I asked a lot of questions. And so it was really great because the one challenge, and I think this is honestly the biggest challenge we have other than shame, is isolation. So I came to a community hospital, which I really liked. It was an ideal size. I could do what I wanted, but, as the only female surgeon here at the time, or general surgeon, that is, and, felt like I really didn't have a lot of support. So I leaned a lot on these social media groups to ask questions. And then I got to know people, and, then I started offering value myself, which empowered me, and realizing that I actually have something to offer. So the ability to kind of like support myself through asking questions led me to a more empowered place. So I started realizing that I actually didn't have to know it all. And in fact, not knowing it all really helped. And a statement that had always helped me, like early on, was I know what I'm supposed to know, which, really made me feel good when someone asked me something I didn't know about how to do something. It's like, well, I know what I'm supposed to know. I know how to be a good surgeon. So if I don't know how to figure out the clinic schedule, that's okay. I can ask about it. I don't have to make it mean anything about me.
Mhm.
So I think that was the one thing that I learned, is the ability to ask questions.
Love it. Okay, so that vulnerable enough that you don't have to know all the answers, brave enough to ask questions and not tell yourself that you're doing it wrong when you have to ask questions.
Exactly. And, and that fear that we have that people are going to come back and go, oh my gosh, can you believe she asked me this question? She doesn't even know. Like crickets. No one's caring. No one cares. Most people are really thinking about what they're thinking. And so like this magnified, just like we are talking about, like magnified fear and shame that's hiding in the dark, once we start realizing no one's actually looking.
One of my early mentors said, to me, don't go looking for a partnership or a business owner position until you've been doing this job for about 5 years. Like, get the medicine under your belt before you have to add the higher skill of business and, people, hire, fire. So that was kind of the lesson I was given in business at the very early stages. Like, this is year 2 of my general practice training in Australia. I thought that was an interesting. So I was being offered, of course, all the things, all the partnerships, all the places to work. Like, you're kind of singled out and said, okay, come look at our place and see if you want to work here. As you're starting to look around at your options for when you're become an attending. So tell us that interaction piece. So you're now in an employed position, you're interacting with staff, you're interacting with your surgical team at the hospital. What are you encountering that isn't as fun or as easy as you
Oh,
expected it to be?
this, these were like probably like my most important lessons, like as going along, the ones that cause us the most distress. When we really tap into the idea, like this is the exact place we need to learn, like this is your curriculum that you didn't sign up for. The biggest challenge that I had was not so much in the OR, but was in the clinic. And my strength of taking ownership of things and finding out how to do stuff and implementing things, worked really, really well until all of a sudden it didn't. And what I mean by it didn't is, I did not realize the effect that that was having on the people around me. So people really liked me, and then all of a sudden they didn't, and I didn't understand, and I thought it was them. I'm sure they thought it was me. And really what it was is none of us really understood that job satisfaction is based on mastery and recognition. Mastery meaning I'm good at what I do, and recognition meaning other people see it. And one thing we can control, showing up and doing a good job, And recognition is other people seeing it. We actually need people to see what we're doing. And when I was doing everything myself, I was getting it done, but I was disempowering the other people. I was not allowing them to get good at their job, and I wasn't recognizing them. I didn't realize that. And so that was one really big lesson, is realizing the effect that we have on other people, because we're so worried about how we're coming across and the job we're doing. We haven't tapped into managing other people. And, are they getting what they need? Are we using them to their greatest capability? And this concept is everybody working at the top of their license. And I know that you do this obviously with notes too. And I've heard you speak all wonderful things. This idea of like, we don't have to do all the things. In fact, we're not supposed to do all the things. It's not useful for anyone. So when we stop doing the things that do not require a doctor, we actually empower the other people to help us. They like literally sitting there waiting to help us.
Tell us an example of that. Tell us one of the things that stands out from that experience for you.
Oh, this is all about like the ability to delegate, which is something that we're not taught. And I talk about this in the book, and I borrowed Michael Hyatt's 5 steps of delegation. Is we don't know how to delegate and tell someone how to do something. For one thing, we have like our own mind drama about giving other things to people. Like, they're going to think I'm lazy. I should do this. It's going to be quicker for me to do this. They're not even going to do it right the first time, and of course they won't, but that's not the point. And so all the things we tell ourselves will hold ourselves back. And then once we finally get over that mental hurdle that we're supposed to ask people to do stuff, then we start to learn how to ask them. So like when I thought I was being clear, I did not realize that I was not being clear. I thought I was being clear. It made sense to me, but making sense to me doesn't matter to the other person if they don't understand it. So even simply saying, do you understand? And feel free to ask me for questions. One of the strengths that I have is getting along with other people. And I did not realize that that's actually a setup for disaster too, because if someone really likes you, they do not want you to think badly of them. So they're not going to tell you they don't know how to do it. They're not going to tell you they're overwhelmed. What's going to happen is that they are going to sit in silence and let their shame magnify. So first is making sure they understand. And then second is checking in with them and saying, it's okay to ask questions. I would not expect you to get this right. And why don't you tell me what you're thinking so I understand where you're at? And it then becomes a two-way street rather than just me, dropping things down from on high. It becomes this dialogue of like, how do we make you successful? Because if you're successful, I'll be successful. And that was mind-blowing for me, is when I started realizing that, people liking me actually had the potential to cause a worse dynamic.
Fair enough. What was the cost to you when you were doing the things that weren't doctor jobs? So you were doing things, spending time kind of muddling about where you could have been delegating that task. What did that look like? How was that in your clinical day?
I couldn't grow. I, really skyrocketed and became very efficient, and, had this like, the number of cases and the people I could see in a clinic, I just tapped out. So I couldn't get new patients. I couldn't grow. I wouldn't be able to, go beyond what I was doing. And some of these things were just wearing me down. Like, I didn't want to have to do some of these little things. And so like writing some orders and doing some of these things, they started wearing on me because I knew that I shouldn't be doing them. And, then I would start resenting those tasks. So I reached this plateau of growth that I couldn't get beyond that. And that's when I realized, something had to change. And I know that through your work that I've been, going through your masterclass and things like that too, I was like, this is exactly what it is. So using your advice and other things that I'd seen, I started taking the computer in with me and trying and typing, because I used to think that I have to give the patient all my attention. And, you can actually give them more attention by saying, this really means something. Hold on a second. I'm gonna make sure this is in your note. So that became part of the relationship with that too. So it's the ability to realize what our limiting thoughts were and, making ourselves the mission of being more efficient and using our time wisely. And one thing that I took away from you that was so important is that your time in clinic is your time in clinic. All that afterwards is unpaid time. That's a waste. It's a waste of your time. And, what you have done is create an unsustainable schedule. So one thing that I've seen with time management, both in clinic and then in just regular life, is my inability to accurately assess the amount of time something takes. So one of the things that I did with that, and after clinic, is I started timing how long something took me. So how I evolved is that when I did, like, for example, a breast cancer summary, that was important to me to have this note that has all the things. Those took a lot of time. And I eventually just kind of stopped it, became a little resentful of it. So, but I was like, how much does this really take? And so I realized it took me about 20 minutes. So I either blocked time for 20 minutes or I said, this is 20 minutes that I just can't spare. Even though this summary is important to me, you can get this in the record, things like that. So at first I stopped doing it, but then I realized this is not a doctor task. So I hired a nurse practitioner about a year ago. And so now she does the summaries. So
Right. Okay. So this is a great example because I love this. So you're in the room with the patient, computer's outside, and you're spending the time with the patient because that's what someone had taught you at some point was the right way to build relationship and rapport with the patient, right? Nothing wrong with that. This is just at some point someone had put this impression on you that this is how a consultation goes. Then you hear something that says, actually, if you took the computer in with you, maybe we're adding that value differently for the patient. Right. So we've got the computer in the room because now in real time, I can capture what you just said. So it's not forgotten. It's captured in real time. We're not going to forget it. That's adding value to this encounter because we're actually doing the things required for this patient as part of this consultative service.
Exactly.
And it's now not delegated to Amy later, who's not enjoying the evening charting.
Exactly.
And then you're like, and now I'm going to wrap this up in a tidy little bow and call it breast cancer summary. I'm going to tell you all the things about her journey and what I expect to happen in the future. I'm expecting that's kind of like what you mean by a breast cancer summary. Tidy it up in a big bow. Then you did the work. You're like, this is what I capture out of the chart note. This is how I record it. This becomes a valuable asset for this person going forward for her informational continuity with all of the team. Once you understand where's the information, how do I record it? So it's this value piece for the patient. Now we're ready to give it to somebody else. It's no longer physician work.
Exactly.
This is the problem-solving physician, like you're the executive director, you're the boss. You know what is valuable for this patient going forward. And once you've captured your process, now it's time to hand it on. We do this all the time with physicians because you're right, you're trapped here. You're like, here is a breast cancer patient. I know exactly what she needs going forward, but now I'm the bottleneck.
Exactly.
Once you realize you're the bottleneck, which we always are, as the high level, we're the high level decision maker within this piece of the puzzle, then we hand it on to our staff who do a terrible job to start with, right? What was the process of onboarding your nurse practitioner for this particular piece?
It's a great question because this was a lesson that I learned too about CEO time. So like the ability to stop and create. So I started doing this standard operating procedures. I learned this through Amy Porterfield, the systems at scale of taking the time. So she had a framework of this is the task. This is why it's important. This is how long I expect it to take. Here are the steps. Here are the screenshots. Yes. So I scheduled time to do that. And when I scheduled time to do that, I was able to gain back time. So I had to really understand that time is an investment for the future. And, when you're in a productivity mode, you're thinking, this is free stuff. I mean, we can fall in the trap of saying like, I'm supposed to be working for time. My time is money. But when you really realize that investment in time is going to pay off, I created standard operating procedures. Then I created a checklist too. That checklist saved me. So if you do something a lot, like if you need to pull images and labs and things like that, It took me a little bit of time, and it wasn't the first iteration that really I'm probably on like the third one, but every time I was like, is this helping you? Like, well, this is kind of long. So I made it one sheet with check boxes. So now I give this to her and say, get all these things. And then I give the MA stuff to gather things. And then all three of us, my medical assistant who gathers the information, my nurse practitioner who's now become like my secondary brain, and me, we all sit together and we all learn too. So what happens is we're all on the same page. I've created this system that we can all understand what we're all thinking and what needs to happen. And they are troubleshooting and problem solving for me. So, but I'm still the leader pulling things together. So I'm also not leaving them off into the abyss of trying to figure stuff out. Like, I don't want to do this anymore. You figure it out. That doesn't work either.
Yeah. So I find it fascinating that you will have a patient turn up to a surgeon, and the surgeon doesn't have the scans in front of them. And it's just the humor and the pause to say, well, why not? At what point in the process of saying yes to this patient could somebody have gone and found for you X, Y, and Z that you will need as the decision maker in this specialized consultation? Wait a minute, what's gone wrong? It's just kind of like this light bulb moment of, what do you mean you're seeing a patient and there's no scan? Like, who can help you and what do you need to tell them? And at what point of this process do they need to go find that information on your behalf? Instead of surgeon seeing patient, now rummaging through internet, trying very desperately to find last CT scan so we can have a conversation of value while they're here.
Oh, yeah.
And then, okay, the whole system, slow computers, blah, blah, blah. Okay, I'll do that later and I'll get back to you. It's like, now we're creating 2 visits or additional time for the decision maker, surgeon, to do this work. And you're like, hang on, this is not sustainable. This is not how you give the best information to your best brain and patient relationship. We use the other people in your team to really assist you. So as you're noticing these frustrations, I noticed that I have a new patient in front of me and I have no idea what's happened to them before. Interesting. And then now what? What is it about this encounter that could be improved? Because if this happens for the next 20 patients in a row, suddenly we're going to have a burnt out physician.
Burned out staff, because
you're coming out of the room frustrated, you're throwing things, you're like, where's the scan? Blah, blah, blah. Don't you know I need scans? Blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
Yes. And if we don't check in with them too, we'll go out there and say, where are my scans? And like, what scans? Was I supposed to get a scan? You never told me I was supposed to get a scan. Did you not see what I'm doing? And really like tapping into our workflow too, because sometimes they are pulled in a lot of directions. And, we really have to ask the next question. One, what do I need? And the second is, you got to clean up your thoughts before you start asking the question, because if you're like, I cannot believe that they are not doing this for me. They should know how to do this. They should be doing this. What is wrong with them? And if we do not clean that up before we go approach them, we're like, I don't know why they're so mad. I didn't say all the things I was thinking. Like, it's like projected on your forehead.
Okay, so that's the cleaning up your thoughts is really that getting back into the place of noticing what you're saying about them. They should know I need scans. And then pause. Right. So this is where we step back and think about our clinical day. We're thinking about the busyness and the business of our day. So you're in the busyness of the day is not the time to throw things and tell people you need scans. It's to step back and saying, hang on a minute. I notice I'm not getting scans with new patients. And that's creating a whole lot of work on the back end of my seeing these patients before I can decide if I need to move forward with surgery as a decision for this person. And then stepping into, well, did I ever tell them I needed scans? What else do I need to be able to see these patients most effectively? Who had that conversation with the staff? Has anyone had the conversation with the staff? How do we start to have those conversations? We can't just tell them new patients need scans. because some of them won't remember that. They've got other things on their plate, other priorities. So now we need a process. This is
Exactly.
being good leader. This is being a good boss. This is having effective teams. Is that okay? And then when do I tell my staff this information? Not when I'm busy and flustered and want to throw things. Do I
And
have a meeting time? Do I email them? How do I meet with my staff? How do they ask me questions? Do I want questions right in the middle of clinic, or do I want questions in the middle of the day, or do I want questions on Wednesday morning at 8? Like, what is it? Because they will have questions, like you said. They're supposed to have questions. And we need to give them time to learn and time for questions. So now we need to be adding that in. Where do we fit that? It's all the tools. You're right, Amy. All the tools we weren't taught in order to just turn up and do surgery on someone.
Exactly. And a common mistake that I see people make, there's two of them. One is going to the office manager about your medical assistant.
Mm-hmm.
That seems like a good idea, right? I'll go to the office manager to my medical assistant. And it's interesting. It becomes a bad game of telephone. So instead of the medical assistant understanding what they're supposed to do, and we're not empowering them, what they're thinking is like, she thinks I'm doing a bad job.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm in trouble. I got called to the principal's office.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's one thing, is recognizing that we can develop the relationship with people to where we can share these in a conversational manner, and we could really say, like, I know you want to support me, and I know you're going to do the best job you can. I have no doubt about that. So when we have those two thoughts about people in front of us, it is not a problem to say, when we tell ourselves they're going to do the best they can and they really want to help me. So then we kind of come from this place of like, of course you want to help me. And this is how we're going to do that. And then you tell me, what am I missing?
Mm-hmm.
And then it doesn't become like a thing, because the second problem is the email request. That may help, and it helps to kind of clarify your thoughts. But I would have the email after a conversation that says, okay, let's just, and I say, I'm just going to recap our conversation. Mm-hmm. So now the email is a written, like guide, and not a directive, and not a criticism. And because emails can be tone deaf, what we really want to do is just work on understanding ourselves and other people, and our relationship with them is going to make us much more effective. And it's really not that hard, honestly. It feels hard, but what's really hard is to go back, craft the best email ever, send it off and wait for whatever, wondering how it's going to land, and then dealing with whatever aftermath that emails do. That is a waste of time.
Yeah. Yeah. So choosing, how is the best way to deliver this information and get clarity? And then how do we record the information so we can keep referring back to it later? Yeah.
The scans is a great example. So you say, scans will really help me for the patients. And I bet you don't even know how to do that. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a checklist, and we give it to you. And I want you to really try it and see how it goes. And then you let me know what needs to change. And then all of a sudden you have them as a partner, not as, a partner and an ally, not as an adversarial boss on high type thing.
Yes. There we go. So some of those leadership pieces that you've learned along the way as part of the extracurricular things we didn't learn in medical school.
By doing it wrong 100 times.
Tell us the transition to private. What happened there? Why did you decide private was a good idea?
Oh gosh, it's such a funny thing, because, it felt like a completely sudden thing. I'm sure it wasn't, because I was learning these lessons along the way. And, I think the hardest lesson that I learned was, you could stay in a good job forever. And, I felt it was a good job. My employed practice was a good, by all things, assessed was a good job, but it wasn't great. I knew something was missing. And, the ability to kind of take control of my career and I wanted the great job. So when I started like trying to make some changes, I had discovered coaching at that time, and I had learned a lot of things. I had tried some of these things, like these relationships and challenging your preconceived thoughts. And I was making some progress, but I also, like, the thought that really set it off was, I could complain about this stuff for the next 15 years. And I just knew nothing was going to change. So I'm like looking at this vast horizon of blandness. And I was like, is this what my life is? Is this what we're going to do here? so I had, also learned about real estate. So I knew I was on the verge of something different, something sort of bold and interesting. And it kind of came out of nowhere. I don't think I would have done it so suddenly if the CEO of our medical practice hadn't posed the question to me, because I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. Like that came out of nowhere, it felt like, but it really didn't. But he's like, does that mean you're putting in your notice? And I was like, yes. Yes. And it almost felt like absolute certainty in that moment. So that set me on this, like the suddenness, like that internal deep desire we have to say, we want something different. And then I decided, and then I had to figure it out. A lot of times you're like, study and explore and come up with things. I did the exact opposite. I basically decided, then figured it out. And that was like a really great exploration in, who I was as a person. And it was hard. I've actually found a pattern. This is my third year of private practice. The first part of this was the overwhelm. How am I going to do all this stuff? And so like becoming the person who could overcome that was like one challenge. So I was already evolving to a different person. Then the second year is like, okay, how do I do this better? How do we do this faster? How do we optimize? That's when I hired the nurse practitioner and really employed my folks. So then the practice evolved from this small little micro practice that was going to offer me lots of freedom to all of a sudden I'm kind of stepping into like, my gosh, this is a business. I'm actually like, there's bigger problems, which of course I look back at the year before and thought, well, this is like, that was little things that I was so worried about. And then I was like, well, maybe these things that feel so big now, maybe these will be little things. And then, my third year, I really enjoyed the reward of private practice, which is the ability to hire people and invest in them and watch them grow. So part of this is, turn into freedom and now purpose driven. It's really great to watch people, gain confidence in themselves and realize that they're capable of much more than they were ever told. So, part of my journey now is just really watching people live their best life too, which is of course helping me live mine too. It was not exactly what I thought it was going to be, but I couldn't imagine anything better. And I think all these experiences are to help us evolve to the best version of ourselves, like Brooke Castillo always talks about. And, when you think about it, it's not about making money. It's not about doing things, it's about evolving to the best version of ourselves. So the best version of me now is living these experiences and feeling the pain because I feel like I'm capable of it, and turning these pains into lessons and, sharing it wider so other people can learn it too. And I'm starting to realize a greater purpose than even just being a surgeon was, which I thought was like the big be all end all thing. And so it's just been really fun to watch it all evolve. And I hope that answers your questions. The main thing is this, it's sort of like spontaneous, but it was always meant to be that way. It's fascinating.
What does a week in the life of Amy look like?
Oh, that's a work in progress. So I'm still a full-time surgeon. And, when I look at the RVUs, I'm a high performing surgeon, still high volume. My typical week, I'll take you through that. I take call 5 to 6 times a month, which is our ER call, which is a busy, general surgery practice in one of the largest hospitals in Southern Middle Tennessee. Monday, I have clinic all day with my nurse practitioner. So we see clinic together. And, I basically was able to double my clinic and, also leave some free time in different things. So my clinic now runs much more efficiently. I get more done and I feel more free at the end, and I'm done by 5. Blows my mind. Then Tuesday is same day surgery where I see different things. Wednesday, this is Wednesday, I built in it as administrative day. So I basically dropped down to 0.8 FTE and I'm still, my RVs did not change. And Thursday, clinic again, same as Monday. Friday's the big OR day. I fit in coaching calls at night, sometimes in the morning, but mostly at night, and on Wednesdays. So this coaching really is a passion for me. So I wanted to fit it in. And I tried to do both at full speed for a long time. And it's kind of like you saw Top Gun and Tom Cruise, where he's like, I can make it to this. And he's like falling apart at the seams. So I did that for a little while, but really starting to manage 2 unmanageable careers. They're both jealous mistresses. So, the coaching and being a surgeon, finding a way for them to peacefully coexist to be the best version I want of both of those things is always a work in progress.
Yeah. So seeing that in order to create this other position, you needed to have contained the first one, made it more sustainable in your way. So you've given yourself time to be the boss hat on a Wednesday. You've got that opportunity to do clinic, to see your new patients, but also found ways to optimize that so that you are done at 5. And then you've got that operating time, which is your, mission to, as an on-call surgeon and as a surgeon, to be able to do the things that you wanted to do to help your people. So love it. Well, thank you. This has been very helpful. What's the name of your book so people can go look for it?
Right here. Become the Boss MD, Success Beyond Residency. And it takes you through the career of a fake surgeon named Julia. So we kind of go from the interviews to all the things we've talked about to, transitioning the career, which is another challenge in itself. Mm-hmm. So I hope it's one of these books. I want people to read it. I want them to implement it and discuss it. I'm not interested in someone reading and agreeing with me. I'm interested in them reading and learning and disagreeing with me. I wanted to spark discussion and help other people and really, help us realize that we actually can change medicine. Our ability to individually support ourselves is the way to change medicine rather than trying to hold up a broken system. So I hope that we're all, work together to empower each other.
Love it. And anything we didn't talk about that you wanted to bring today?
No, I think the lessons that I have that are always ongoing, you can find it at bosssurgery.com. That's where you have access to my podcast, the Boss Business of Surgery series. There's a link to the book as well. And then, or for coaching as well, if anyone's interested.
Love it. Very good. If people are way back in that struggle of, how do I negotiate? How do I talk to people? How do I get my team to want to help me with this task? How do I stop doing all the things? What would you suggest? Like, what was a helpful piece that you did at the beginning that would help them now?
Oh, the very first thing is just to start becoming more present in what you're thinking and what your worries are, because what worried me may not worry you. And my worries now are different than they were before. And recognizing that we can stop for a minute and think about things. And I guess the one thing that I would share is this idea of creating blocks of time that are only for you. And I wrote an article called Physicians Need Growth Days, Kevin MD. And like stopping for a minute and allowing yourself the time and space to ask yourself good questions, that will change everything. Negotiations, interacting with other people, tuning into who you are and what's bothering you and the questions you want to ask, that alone will transform your life. That simple thing will change your life.
Yeah. It sounds like community was also a powerful piece for you as well, to notice where you'd come from and where you were going. To that transition you described of, I came in asking the questions and then I realized I had answers.
Yes. Yes. And so if you want to know about negotiations, find a group who's doing it and then become a part of it and ask questions. And before you know it, you will be answering them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love this as that growth piece so that you can see just how far you've come, but you're also being supported by others. And what about someone who's sitting in shame? So if they've got that surgical complication, or they're thinking that people or their staff don't like them, there's something happening within that shame piece. Where do people start there? What do you think? What is helpful for shame?
That's such a great question, because they don't have to solve their own problem yet. If they're worried about complications, they should start asking other people about theirs. Type in complications and find out the articles and things, podcasts that come up. Because when you start listening to what other people are going through, you already don't feel alone and you haven't had to do anything. So you can start passively finding the messages that resonate with you. When you tap into the idea of like, this is what I want to know about. Like Martha Beck talks in Way of Integrity. She's like, books would fly off the shelf at her. Things would like show up out of nowhere. So it's simply pausing and saying, what do I need in this moment? And what do I need to know about? And for some reason, I think the universe conspires to answer your question. So, we make it so hard. I have to find the right thing. I have to find the right person. And all we have to do is start listening. And you'll hear the messages that you need to hear. And then when you find that stream, you stay with it. And it's very normal to have this stream and like, well, now I want to hear this person. So like for me, people come to the podcast and go. People come in the community and go. And I'm the same way in other things too, is that we're going in and out of rooms all the time.
That's a good way of thinking of it. What could we do for our learners, do you think, about this question of complication shame or being good role models for leading teams or having that conversation? Do you think there's room for that within our training? Because leaving it till we're graduated, is there room earlier, do you think?
Oh, 100%. And it's not hard. I think the biggest challenge that we had is that we were always told, like especially surgeons, here's the problem, here's my solution, which is basically circumstance action. Mm-hmm. And recognizing that, because people will tell you what to do. That's most advice driven, is here are the actions to do. But unless you understand the thought and the emotions behind that, you're going to fall short. I learned a lot through Brene Brown's Daring Greatly. So anytime I see a post where I see shame, I post her 3 steps for shame resilience. And so those 3 steps, I try to sprinkle that everywhere, like exponentially share her message. Those 3 steps, very simple. Reach out to a trusted source, community. Talk kindly to yourself, compassion. Own the story so you can own the ending, courage. If we just share those 3 to everybody, then that will really transform it, because it shifts that. Instead of resisting the shame, I shouldn't feel this way, we can shift it to different emotions. Like, now I just feel guilty. And when I feel guilty, I can reach out to other people. So then I hear the messages that I need to hear and I don't feel alone. So each of those steps shines that light on the shame, so we're not in the dark anymore. So sharing those 3 things, if we can really exponentially share that message, I think that's very simple. And to let people know it's okay to have different thoughts and feelings. And those are not necessarily the truth. We actually have choice in these things. So tapping into what we're thinking and feeling, realizing there's a choice, and then offering a framework that can help.
Mm-hmm. Love it. Thank you. Well, thank you, Amy, so much for being here, and encourage you to go check out the book. It's available, and it's just been a delight having you. Thanks so much. Have a great rest
Sarah.
of the day.
It's such an honor to be here. I really appreciate all that you're doing for everyone here in medicine.
No, my pleasure. Thank you for being part of the Sustainable Clinical Medicine podcast. If you'd like to learn more or join us to help you get home with today's work done, go to chartingcoach.ca. There you'll find all the information on the Premier Lifetime Access Charting Champions program that is helping physicians get home with today's work done, with all the proven tools, support, and community you need to create time for your life outside of medicine. We would love to see you there. Until next time, thanks for listening.